Good afternoon, Madam President and Senators. Philippians 1 and 3 states, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you. Today I want to talk about gratitude. I want to invite each of us to pause and to make a note of the things that you are grateful for in our lives and in our country. Do you ever pause at any point in a day to count your blessings? If you reflected over the last year, what blessings and opportunities have you enjoyed? Can you list 10 persons who have made a difference in your life? And how has being a senator been a blessing to you? In Paul's letter to the church at Philippi, he said, when I remember you, I thank God for you. On this day, I want to encourage you to reflect on the hero makers in your life, the persons who have seen you, who saw your potential, opened doors for you, prayed, encouraged, and nurtured you. Those persons are a part of the blessings fabric in your life, who had a hand in your development and personal advancement. Alfred North Whitehead said, no one who achieves success does so without the help of others. The wise and the confident acknowledge this help with gratitude. As we move forward in our development as a country, it is vital to also be persons who display gratitude, because no one is a truly self-made man or woman. They have always been parents and teachers in your life. At times of difficulties in our lives, can serve also as a catalyst to become stronger or to do things differently. Today, as you debate the Senate business, remember that there are persons who are outside of these walls who were instrumental in you being here and having invested years in your development. Be a hero maker for them, a person who will be a blessing to others and will build persons up. Secondly, because you have great opportunities, there is great responsibilities. Never be flippant or callous. You are partnering in the present and future Bahamas. Never forget, there are youngsters looking to you to show them the way. Your actions and your thoughts and your words can cause them to either be grateful for you or not. 1 Thessalonians 1 and 2 states, we give thanks to God always for you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers. Albert Schweitzer said, at times, our own light goes out, and it is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has a cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Let us pray. Dear God, for all your wonderful blessings, we give you thanks. Today, I thank you for each senator, for their unique personalities, special giftings and abilities, for their love of country, and for their appointment to serve in this season of our country's development. Help them to give faithful and dedicated service. Bless the work of their hands and the words of their mouth and everything that they do. May they embrace each opportunity, and may their service be a blessing. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good afternoon, Senators. Good afternoon, Madam Chaplain. Today is Tuesday, the 25th day of July, 2023. Afternoon session. Adoption of minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the minutes of the session of the Senate held on Thursday, 20th of July, 2023 be adopted.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 20th of July, 2023 be adopted. Now to put the question. Okay, come on. As many are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The minutes of the 20th of July, 2023 are hereby adopted. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, swearing in of new senators, communications by the President, the President hereby extend condolences, sincere condolences, to 3 nation builders who passed away during the last week. We extend condolences to the family of Roberta Sands, retired Commissioner of Police Paul Fackerson, and Reverend Lloyd Smith. We thank you for your many years of service, and we pray that God would be with you and your families during this most difficult and traumatic time. In the gallery today, there are 2 visitors that the Senate President wishes to welcome. We have visiting with us Dr. Davina Hoyt. Can you please stand? Dr. Davina Hoyt is from San Diego, California, and she is here participating in the Goma Fest Youth Conference that is sponsored by the Big Harvest Community Church, under the auspices of Pastor John Ferguson, and the Grand Bahama Community Business from Freeport, Grand Bahama. They are conducting a conference for over 50 children and 30 mentors who are from Nassau, Freeport, and the United States. And so during this busy time, she actually came down here to see what the Senate is all about. And so we thank you for coming down to visit. We appreciate you being here, and we hope that you enjoyed today's session. And also with us today is a very distinguished and dapper gentleman who, as Madam Chaplain earlier said, that we ought to thank God for our blessings and our friendships. And he is someone I thank God that we have fostered a friendship with over the years. I speak of none other than Mr. James Jumelis. He was born here in Nassau, but he grew up on the beautiful island of Exuma. He is a party officer of the Progressive Liberal Party and a member of the Bain and Grantstown branch. James serves on the board of directors at Access Accelerator Small Business Development Center, and he works as a security manager at Bahamas. And today he's off, and so I asked him to please come and visit the Senate, and I'm very pleased that you have come to be with us, and I hope that you enjoyed today's proceedings. Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Jumelis. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly.
Messages from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas, number 33. Message to the Honorable the President and honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have agreed to the following resolution and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, now therefore be it resolved that this House, A, approves Parliament being a member of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, B, approves the constitution of a committee comprising of 5 members to have responsibility for organization of the relations and activities of Parliament with Inter-Parliamentary Union, and C, approves the making of guidelines by Parliament on how it will function as a member of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. House of Assembly, Nassau, 24 July 2023. Sylvanus Petty, Deputy Speaker, for Speaker.
Laying of documents by the ministers. Communications by ministers. Communications by senators. Questions. Answers to questions. Presentation of petitions. Appointment of select committees. Reports of committees. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you. On second readings, Madam President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Today I rise to move for the second reading of the Notary's Public Amendment Bill 2023. This bill, although it's short in length, is important to rectify a deficiency in the framework with respect to notaries public. Before I begin, I think it helpful to describe what the functions of a notary are. A notary public is one who is permitted by law to attest legal documents in accordance with Section 3 of the Notaries Public Act. The Act namely makes provision for 3 categories of notaries public. The first is any counsel and attorney of the Supreme Court licensed as a notary public. The second being any person holding or acting in a public office as specified in the first schedule of the Act shall be the ex officio notary public. And thirdly, any person who immediately before the commencement of the Notaries Act, which was 1972, before I was born, was the holder of a license as a notary public under Section 3 of the Notaries Public Act, which is now repealed. The license is for 1 year, expiring on the 31st of December annually, and all licenses are renewable annually at a fee that is prescribed in the second schedule of the Act. There are 2 aspects of a notarial function, and these responsibilities span 2 ministries, one being the Office of the Attorney General, and the second being the Consular Section of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Office of the Attorney General deals with the enrollment of notaries public, the renewal of the notaries' licenses, and the replacement of licenses. The Consulate Section of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs deals with the other aspect of the notarial function, namely authentications and apostilles. Authentication is most often a part of chain of proof that involves a number of cover documents. Thank you. So my neck don't get kinked. Do it backwards. Again, I'm speaking on the authentication process with respect to notaries. Again, the authentication process is mostly part of a chain of proof that involves a number of cover documents in a bundle, where the Minister of Foreign Affairs or an officer designated by him is the last official in that chain. It is the process of verifying the official nature of a document so that officials in another country can accept that document at face value. So when you have to give legal documents in another jurisdiction, those persons in that other jurisdiction have to be confident that that is actually the authentic signatures on that document. So what happens in practice is that you would sign a document in front of a Bahamian notary, and then that document would go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Consular Division to get authenticated. And what they're actually authenticating is the notary's signature, because it is the notary's responsibility to ensure that you, the person signing the document, is actually you. And that is why the notary signs. So that's the process how, when you have a bundle of documents in a cross-border transaction or an international circumstance, that you can verify the authenticity of the signatures on that document. Various other documents, births, deaths, marriages, divorce, police records, corporate good standings, adoptions, transferring of school records, are some of the types of documents submitted for authentication at the consulate section. So we see this in my practice. I'm a commercial lawyer, and so when we do a lot of cross-border transactions, or we have clients in other jurisdictions, or dealing with regulatory institutions in other jurisdictions, we would have the client sign here, we would get a notary. I generally avoid acting as a notary, so I usually use somebody like Michaela. And then they would notarize the documents, and then they would go to Foreign Affairs, and then we would ship them off to wherever the destination is out of the country. And we do that a lot with corporate documents, corporate good standings, resolutions, and other important documents. When a document is notarized, the apostille in the form prescribed by the Hague Convention, now apostilles, as I'm saying, is governed by the Hague Convention, conclusively establishes that the signature of the notarial officer is genuine. The apostille attests to the validity of that signature, and the Hague Convention applies to documents which have been executed in one country to the other, not for domestic filings. So the Notaries Public Amendment Bill 2023 before us, what does this do? This bill seeks to address really two issues raised by public and private attorneys alike for a number of years. In fact, this bill originated out of the former administration. Namely, waivers and exemptions for certain licensees who are, one, restricted or prohibited from engaging in the practice of a notary, or employed by the government or a nonprofit organization. And secondly, the provision of a grace period between the expiry and renewal of that notary license, which allows for some of the administrative gaps and bureaucratic gaps between submission of a license and the actual issuance of the license. We enter a grace period. Every January, I would get emails from lawyers generally saying, "Where's my notary license? I have documents stacked up. I can't notarize these because you haven't issued my license. I have paid for the renewal. I have submitted it. And because of the bureaucratic process of government, it wasn't instantly issued. So there's a gap period." This looks to rectify that issue in providing the grace period so we don't have this situation where effectively the provision of notarial services to clients in the commercial practice comes to a halt. With respect to waivers and exemptions, the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs has received numerous requests for waivers and exemptions from the requirement to pay the annual renewal fees under the Notaries Public Act. These requests have come from licensees under the Act who were, by the nature of their post, either partially or wholly prohibited from performing notarial services, namely attorneys employed in the public service and former members of Parliament. In fact, no fewer than 2 ministers from the prior F&M administration have written me directly seeking waivers of their fees as notaries, because when they were serving in the public service as ministers, they didn't keep their license up to date because they weren't using it. There are also long-serving attorneys from the Office of the Attorney General who are retiring who have likewise made similar requests for waivers. For example, we have a prosecutor in our office who, since 2007, who has been in the office since 2007. So she would not have had her notary license renewed since 2007. She is prosecuted up until this year, so 15 years. She is in pre-retirement leave and will demit office later this year. As a policy, during those years, 2007 to 2023, which is more than 15 years, 26 years, she could not use her notary seal as it would have been a conflict of interest. This former prosecutor would like her notary license to be active in retirement. And fees from 2007 to 2023 to be waived. This is an appropriate request, especially given her long-time commitment to the public service. As we know, lawyers generally have the option to leave the public service for much more fruitful engagement elsewhere. Her notary's license is not in good standing. No, absolutely not. No. Well, the amount of the arrears would be almost $5,000. For years when she was not active as a private attorney, because she was working for government as a prosecutor. I promised I would ensure that we are in a position legally to fulfill her request. And today, Madam President, that promise is being fulfilled. Similarly, requests for waivers of fees have come from attorneys in private practice who have ceased to perform notarial services. That would be like me, because I didn't, as a matter of my practice, perform notarial services. Whether temporarily or permanently, and by the nature of the act, continue to accumulate arrears. An attorney who wishes to resume performing their notarial services must then clear those arrears. So there was not a mechanism where you could say, I don't want to be a notary for this year, next year, or however many years, but then you want to resume, to be able to suspend, for example, your license without fee. While these persons have petitioned the Office of the Attorney General for waivers and exemptions, the Act contains no provision authorizing the waiver of notary public fees, nor the granting of exemptions. We've researched similar laws in other jurisdictions, including Bermuda, Canada, the Cayman Islands, Singapore, Trinidad and Tobago, to determine whether the practice outlined above was common, and found that it was not. In other words, they provided a mechanism for waivers or exemptions of fees, which we did not. And we see these discrepancies exist in older legislation. Again, this bill is older than I am. And so we see these types of discrepancies. Back then, you didn't have a lot of notaries because you didn't have as many lawyers. And notary business was a significant part of practice. Today, you have a lot of lawyers, and notary practice isn't necessarily a sufficient or significant part of their practice. So circumstances have changed. To honor the feedback of licensees, and in light of the unfairness of the current practice, the proposed new Section 6B of the bill seeks to provide that a licensee who is also a counsel and attorney in the employee of government, a counsel and attorney in the employ of a duly registered not-for-profit, or a member of parliament, shall be exempt from paying fees for the time that that licensee holds those respective offices. Now, one addition that we put in that wasn't in the draft that we inherited was the provision related to not-for-profits. But we want to encourage people working for and advancing the not-for-profit framework in this country. And we, to the extent they hire lawyers who would be licensees and those lawyers aren't performing the service, you would want them exempt as well. The proposed new Section 6B will also permit a licensee who is not practicing as a notary to pause his license by surrendering it to the minister. Thereafter, that licensee will no longer accrue arrears for the years he did not practice as a notary. Licensees who are looking to permanently cease offering notarial services may also take advantage of this pause button. With respect to the grace period on the renewal of the license, Madam President, the proposed new Section 6A seeks to provide a clearly determinable time for the renewal of a license, as well as provide for a grace period between expiration and renewal. While the Act specifies the date of expiry of a license, it does not speak to the period which renewal should be sought. In practice, it is generally accepted that licenses should run from the 1st of January to the 31st of December each year. However, the 1st of January being a public holiday complicates the process for renewal, as does the mechanisms of government. The lack of a determinable period for renewal has resulted in conflicting opinions on what the appropriate process in these instances should be. In light of this, the proposed new Section 6A of the bill seeks to provide, firstly, that all licenses expire on the 31st of December next, following the issuance, so the following 31st of December after the issuance of the license. All applications for renewal should be made on or before the 31st of December, which would be the expiration date. A renewed license shall have effect if the renewal application is made before the license expires, from the first day of January following that expiration, which would be the 31st of December. If renewed after lapsing from the date of application for renewal to the 31st of December, it will be honored. So if you don't get your application in until February 1st, let's say, that gap of January will be a gap. However, we will deem your license renewed as of when your application was submitted. So the 1st of February in my example. The bill also provides a transitional provision which allows persons who, prior to the commencement of the bill, would have been eligible for a waiver or an exemption. However, the waiver or exemption would only apply in respect of a 15-year period. We wanted to give enough time to make it reasonable and substantial, but you can't leave it open-ended. Madam President, these are the operable provisions of the Notary's Public Amendment Bill 2013. We have a lot of old pieces of legislation on the books, and relevant legislation, but old legislation, who in this time are either inconsistent with practice or need to reflect the norms of today. And this is an instance in which we are doing it. We, as the Parliament, are tasked with doing that. And so when I hear utterances, primarily from that other place, because we have good, respectable people in this upper chamber, that we were wasting our time by doing certain bills, they clearly do not comprehend what the responsibilities of the legislative process are. And part of that responsibilities is modernizing historical legislation to reflect the norms of today's society and what functions from day to day. This is an example of that. So I trust we will not have such rhetoric in here today, because I think we all recognize the benefit of bringing legislation up to date. With that, Madam President, I move for the second reading of the Notary's Public Amendment Bill 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Barry Griffin.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to second the Notary's Public Amendment Bill. But before I begin my presentation in earnest, I would like to acknowledge the death of retired Commissioner of Police and former Bahamas High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Paul Farquharson. Madam President, this is a great loss for our country. Paul Farquharson was a statesman of the highest order, a true Bahamian patriot, and one who gave of himself to country. It was Maya Angelou who once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." In reflecting on the death of High Commissioner Farquharson, I can attest to this statement. I met Mr. Farquharson as a law student in London when he was High Commissioner to the UK. He made it part of his mandate to include the wider Bahamian diaspora in the UK in whatever was done at the High Commission. In particular, he was adamant that Bahamian students register with the High Commission and be a part of everything that was done. We became fast friends, and he never made me feel like a student or some young kid. He literally gave me a seat at the table at the High Commission, effectively making me the de facto student representative, helping the High Commission with whatever was needed. Whenever a government minister came to town, he was sure to invite me to meet them and ask that I invite other students as well. He made it a point to connect the next generation to the current powers that be. It was through the High Commissioner that I had the opportunity to learn much about how foreign affairs works abroad, the work of an ambassador, and the many things our government and government ministers do abroad. I remember assisting the High Commissioner with a visit of former Prime Minister Hubert Ingram, and then assisting with a visit of former Governor General Arthur Folkes. I had many views on politics and what should happen in government, and it was High Commissioner Farquharson who encouraged me to make them known to the then PM. So when the PM came to London, I spoke to him about many of my views, one of them being how Bahamian students were not allowed to vote in elections from the High Commissions abroad. Now, sidebar. About 6 months after this conversation, Ingram came back to the Bahamas and passed legislation whereby Bahamian students for the first time were allowed to vote in our embassies abroad in the 2012 election. Now, I'm not saying that was because of me, but I'm not saying it was because of me. But all of this prompted the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, Fred Mitchell, then in opposition, to ring me in London and say, "Griffin, I hope we ain't losing you. I see Ingram and folks them." He went on to say, "Well, anyways, we need to get the PLP up there to meet with the students. Organize it for us." And in 2012, before the election, I organized the visit of the then deputy leader of the PLP, Philip Brave Davis, and then opposition MP Fred Mitchell. So, all is to say, all was redeemed. But, Madam President, it is with great sadness and profound thankfulness that I remember Paul Farquharson. He is a stellar example of where hard work and dedication can take you. He was an aide to former Governor General Gerald Cash, and he ascended to the heights of becoming Commissioner of Police and Ambassador for the Bahamas. And in all of this, he found time to make a simple law student in the UK feel welcomed. May his soul rest in peace. Madam President, now turning to the Notary's Public Amendment Bill. This bill undoubtedly has a narrow focus, but the focus of which intends to have real impact to an important profession in the Bahamas, with ramifications to all aspects of society. The amendment bill is very specific and addresses unnecessarily vexing problems that should have been dealt with long ago. But alas, here we are. For the benefit of the general public, the notary is probably one of the oldest and most prominent branches of the legal profession, whose role has been present in all civilizations in history, whether it be the scribes of ancient Egypt or the notarii of the Roman Empire. And not much has changed in modern times. Notaries remain fundamental in legal systems throughout the world. Here in the Bahamas, like in many countries, the notary public is an individual who is permitted by law to attest legal documents, which include the administration of oaths and the authentication of legal instruments. Unlike in some countries where the notary public is a standalone profession, here in the Bahamas, the notary public is considered a supplementary function that is held by professions listed in the Notary's Public Act. If you are looking for a notary public here in Nassau, it is likely that you would meet with an attorney or a justice of the peace. If you need one while on a family island, you may meet with another professional, such as the island administrator. Madam President, the role of the notary is to validate that a person has signed a document in their presence by confirming their identity, and in some cases, they confirm the existence of a particular document or identification in its true form. The role of the notary is important in everyday life, and in particular when it comes to legal documents and legal processes. We've all needed a notary in the past at some point, and we all will likely need one in the future. To notarize your passport application, an affidavit, a contract, and the like. Ensuring that notaries can seamlessly provide this vital service is not just good for notaries, but is good for the legal system as a whole and good for the general public at large. Today, we are seeking to modernize the notarial field. The bill before us seeks to provide a 1-month grace period between the expiration of a license and the renewal date. The bill also seeks to establish the duration of licenses according to the Act. Further, Madam President, the bill also seeks to insert new sections which seek to provide for the renewal date of applications made before or after the date of expiry, exempt certain licenses from the payment of renewal fees, waive arrears of unpaid fees for the exempt licenses, provide for the pausing and resumption of offering notarial services, and provide for the limited extension of the exemption and waiver of fees to licensees who would have qualified for the exemption or waiver of renewal fees prior to the commencement of the Act. Madam President, admittedly, this isn't the sexy work of passing landmark legislation such as establishing the legal framework for BAMSI, a major agricultural institute, something we've already done, or passing budgets that lower the import duties on tens of products the average Bahamian uses daily, something we've also already done. Or, Madam President, this isn't the transformative work of passing a parliamentary service bill that will revolutionize and modernize the administration of Parliament, a bill that we've passed in the lower house and intend to do so here in this place. Rather, Madam President, this is a nuts and bolts piece of legislation. It may not be sexy, but it keeps the system going. It makes doing business in the Bahamas a little bit easier and makes a necessary service easier to obtain by the majority of Bahamians. So, Madam President, we do the sexy, the revolutionary, and the transformative, but we also do the nuts and bolts, like the many financial services amendments to comply with international best practices, the Law Reform Revision Act, the Housing Probation Resolution, just to name a few. Madam President, to say it again, we can walk and chew gum. And to Senator Barnett, we won't fall and we won't choke. So today, Madam President, I know it all seems mundane, but it brings the act in line with industry best practices. It allows for the seamless resumption of the work of notaries. It will improve the ease of doing business. It will improve the reliance of documents in our court system, and it's a tweak that makes things just a little bit easier. And so, as I said before, and I will say again, if it makes the Bahamas just a little bit better for Bahamians, if it ensures that even just one Bahamian can be gainfully employed, I will happily stand here and lend my support. So, Madam President, with that, I second this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Barry Griffin, for your contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and admitted. A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Bonnet Ellis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to join you in welcoming Dr. Davina Hoyt and James Julimus to the Senate chambers today. I'm hoping that this will be one of our less eventful days in the Senate. Madam President, this is the day the Lord has made, and let us rejoice and be glad. It's Tuesday afternoon, and it already feels like death is all around. I want to open by expressing my condolences to the families of the late Dr. Gail Saunders, the late Reverend Dr. Lloyd Smith, the late retired Commissioner Paul Farquharson, which also includes the mighty Hannah Hasty Tynes family, and the family of the late Roberta Bobby Sands, the family of Pastor Larry Wilshcombe, and to all persons in the Bahamas that have lost a loved one recently. Our beautiful country is small, and compared to other countries, we may not measure up in scale, but we compensate with our might and resilience. Suffice to say, it's reasonably easy to see leaders in real time, at the food store, at church, at birthday parties, men and women who are leaders, influencers, giants in their own right. We walk amongst giants, giants who sculpted and framed this nation of ours into what it is for the betterment of us, their fellow Bahamians. But we are losing our giants and our influencers, and we must remember to cherish them and give them their flowers whilst they are alive. As Madam Chaplain said, we must show our gratitude. Madam President, today we are debating amendments to the Notary Public Act. There are some pieces of legislation that are heavy hitters and change the course of a country, like the DARE Act, or the proposed amendment to the Sexual Offenses Act, or the draft Gender-Based Violence Bill. And then there are pieces of legislation that quietly deal with and amend legislation that make doing business in the Bahamas better. I don't often tell stories in this place, but there's no better way than I can think of to illustrate the problem which previously arose. A few years ago, I got a call from a colleague that was in-house counsel for one of our clients. It was the first week of January, and they had time-sensitive documents that needed to be notarized. But my colleague had not received his renewed notary license back from the Office of the Attorney General. They called me to see if Graham Thompson had gotten their notary licenses back from the Office of the Attorney General. We had not gotten them either, but we were able to call the Office of the Attorney General to inquire as to the effective date of our licenses for the year. Because you see, we didn't want to notarize the documents during the gap between the license expiring on the 31st of December and whenever they would have been signed by the Attorney General. Thankfully, our licenses had been signed and were effective, and so I was able to assist the client by notarizing their documents. Madam President, I'm sure you are aware as counsel that there was a time when the effective date of your notary license could vary from year to year, and you had to make sure that you didn't notarize documents between that gap. I've stressed far too often about the necessity for certainty in law. Certainty is priceless. And I'm grateful that we are remedying this mischief and putting certainty in the effective date of notary licenses. The amendments in this bill, which relate to the circumstances in which license fees can be waived or a notary can be exempt from fees, require a little more unpacking. Of course, it makes sense that counsel and attorney in the employ of the government ought to be exempt from the payment of notary license fees because the government is taking money from the consolidated fund to pay money into the consolidated fund. Further, it makes sense that counsel and attorney in the employ of a duly registered nonprofit organization would be exempt from the payment of notary license fees. We've seen the exemption for those NGOs with relation to UB or the Bahamas National Trust, where they are exempt from real property tax and the payment of VAT. But we need to make sure that this is not abused and that the notaries who are seeking to be exempt under this section must be in the full-time employment of the NGO and not employed elsewhere or practicing law independently. I do, however, disagree that a member of parliament should be exempt from the payment of notary license fees. Attorneys that are members of parliament and not members of cabinet can continue to operate their law practices without any restriction and have no disadvantage by being a member of parliament, which would warrant or justify the exemption of fees. Cabinet ministers are different. They will not be notarizing fees whilst they are cabinet ministers, and therefore they should apply under section 6B3A of the new bill for a waiver by advising the minister, in this case the Attorney General, that they do not intend to practice or perform any of the functions of a notary during their tenure in cabinet. Madam President, the amendments to this bill, while not groundbreaking, demonstrate the considerations that must be made while operating a government. I know that we are in the minority, and the government has its legislative agenda as much as it is an agenda, and it requires that this bill be passed before the summer recess. But I ask the government to reconsider Section 6B1C. Let me say that differently. Section 6B, subsection 1, subsection C, at a time when it is painfully apparent that this government will look under every nook and cranny to secure government revenue. Why are we exempting persons who are more than capable of paying a license fee of $250? And with that, Madam President, I pray that God continue to grant comfort to those who mourn, and may the Lord that never sleeps nor slumbers continues to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Michael Bonnet Ellis. As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock.
President, I tell you. Madam President, Senate colleagues, good evening. Madam President, I would like to join my colleagues and join you in welcoming Mr. Davinia Hoyt, as well as Mr. James Jules. He's still a gentleman indeed. Madam, thank you for gracing us with your presence, also, Mr. Jules. Madam President, firstly, I would like to convey my sympathies, join my colleagues in conveying sympathies to the late Dr. the Right Honorable Gail Saunders, who's left us at this time, Madam President. We celebrated her in a state-recognized funeral service at the Anglican Cathedral last Friday. Dr. Sanders defined the very concept of archivist, intellectual, and historian. Because of her steadfastness on her pursuit of excellence, Bahamians came to learn more about our journey. Because of Dr. Sanders, Bahamians have a clearer focus as to who we are, where we are going, and how we are going to get there. May she rest in peace. I would also like to join in conveying my sympathies to Dr. Lloyd C. Smith. I also, Madam President, Dr. Smith was a former president of the Bahamas Baptist community who passed away suddenly over the weekend. Dr. Smith was a building contractor, and all over the nation there are testaments to his craft and skill. He was a chief shepherd of a growing congregation at his Sandy Port Baptist Church, and he was loved and respected by the Baptist community and his parishioners. May his soul rest in peace. I also, Madam President, would like to extend condolences to the National Chairman of the Free National Movement, Dr. Dwayne Sands, and the entire Sands family on the passing of their dear mother. And last but not least, and I would like to say a special condolences to Sandy Robert Sands, and again, may his mother's soul rest in peace. And last but not least, Madam President, I would also like to convey my condolences to the former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Paul Farquharson, who left us last week as well. Mr. Farquharson embodied the true discipline and decorum of a policeman and distinguished himself abroad in later years as the Bahamas High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. Madam President, our finest sons and daughters are moving from the scene. The least we can do from the examples of their work and legacy is to strive to do our part to build our country, build up our fellow citizens, and promote peace, harmony, and goodwill towards all. Thank you, Madam President, for your indulgence. Madam President, the amendments to the Notaries Act will make it easier for those seeking to be licensed. And before I get into the Notaries Bill, Madam President, I'd like to acknowledge the Attorney General, who's doing a yeoman's job, Madam President. And to his staff. I mean, we have had a robust legislative agenda. And we have the AG and his team to thank for that. Madam President, the amendments to the Notaries Public Act will make it easier for those seeking to be licensed and seeking renewals, waivers, etc., as pertains to their licenses to practice as notaries public in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to know and understand the requirements and entitlement under the law. The Act makes provisions for a notary public applies for and pays his annual license fee to the government and pays his annual license fee. Madam President, the bill gives a 1-month amnesty to a delinquent licensee license between the expiration of a license and a renewal date. The bill also seeks to establish the duration and validity of licenses according to the current Act, Madam President. Those of us who practice in conveyancing can stress the importance of this. There have been situations where conveyances have been delivered, and it turns out in a search that the title, that the notary public who swore the document was not a licensed notary public for the purposes of the Act when the document was executed. So, Madam President, we see where this can create a dilemma. And so this is an extremely and timely amendment to the Act. Again, we thank the AG. This bill removes any ambiguity from the date on which the license is to take effect for the notary public application. The amendment also seeks to insert sections into the Principal Act which provide for the renewal date for applications made before or after the date of expiry of a license, exempt certain licenses from the payment of renewal fees, waive arrears of unpaid fees for exempt licensees, provide for the pausing and resumption of offering notarial services. These amendments give solace to the Bahamian public that due care and attention is afforded the notary public with the new windows to renew a license after it has expired. The public will also now be minded to pay attention to the license instrument of a notary public, which should be displayed in a prominent place in a chamber for the client's inspection. These amendments protect the public and they protect the notary. The Amendment Act before us today was in the drafting room when the former government was in office. The Davis-Cooper administration has brought changes to what was formerly proposed, and those changes, in my opinion, makes for a solid and vibrant framework for the services of the notary public. This bill also sets the parameters for the exemption and waiving of fees payable of persons who hold office in the government for in the service of Bahamian people, as well as colleagues in this place, so long as they retain the position. Madam President, the three categories where there are fee waivers are: one, and you would have heard it previously, government employees such as attorneys who are notary publics, counsel and attorneys at law engaged full-time by a duly registered nonprofit, and members of Parliament. Madam President, the Bill Act speaks to the resumption of practice of a notary public after not practicing for some time. The Notaries Act deserves our unanimous support. Thank you, Madam President.
We ain't throwing no rock today, you know. We ain't throwing no rock today. Let's see where you go.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock, for your contribution. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Quentin Lyburn.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Madam President. It is always a pleasure to rise in these honorable chambers, Madam President. Every day I'm reminded of the immense privilege it is to serve as a senator in this House. I would also like to join my Senate colleagues in welcoming to the gallery Mr. James Julmus, Dr. Hoyt, who I spoke to yesterday. Good to finally see you in person. And also, without a shadow of a doubt, I consider him a constant fixture in the gallery, Mr. Calvin Farquharson. I took the time to participate in the 50th Independence events and the 6th edition of the Bahamas Games. And at the last sitting of the Senate, I did not give a contribution, so I plan to recognize persons that I feel as if deserve recognition. Madam President, Her Excellency Leslie Miller Bryce did a splendid job celebrating our country and culture. The Bahamian people can attest that they enjoyed each and every event that led up to our independence and the tattoo on Clifford Park. I'm still in shock at how much we have done as a nation in just half a century. As a young Bahamian, I felt a sense of pride and patriotism, and I'm sure that it has revitalized those feelings amongst many others in our country, from Bimini straight down to Inaba. We are indeed pressing onward and marching to a common, loftier goal. This government is about nation building, and we are not moved by the naysayers and people that seek to throw us off track. We hear the cries and concerns and we will address each and every one of them. The Notary's Public Amendment Bill 2023 seeks to establish the duration and the validity of licenses issued in accordance with the Act, as well as to provide for a grace period of 1 month between the expiry of license and the time to renew them. Madam President, my contribution will be very short this afternoon. This bill is not intended to affect every member of the Bahamian society, but it will impact real change in the legal profession. We must balance the scale of societies, and this is what we are doing with this legislation. As always, when I speak to the Bahamian people, I would like to inform them of what exactly it is that we are debating and speaking about, so it will shed light on what is a notary's public. It is an essential but often overlooked profession. These unsung heroes play a vital role in our legal system, ensuring the authenticity and integrity of various documents that govern our lives. A notary public is a certified officer who acts as an impartial witness when individuals sign important legal documents. They verify the identity of the signers and ensure that they understand the contents of the documents that they are signing. By affixing their official seal and signature, notaries provide a crucial layer of trust and credibility to the documents they handle. These persons are legally authorized by the government, and the history of notaries can be traced back to ancient times, where they served as scribes and record keepers in the Roman Empire. Today, they continue to be a cornerstone of modern legal proceedings, enabling transactions and agreements to be executed with confidence and security. The duties of a notary public extend beyond just witnessing signatures. They also administer oaths and affirmations, facilitate international document certifications, and help prevent fraud by ensuring the validity of identification presented by parties involved. Notary publics are found in various professions, which can be very trickle-off effects in our economy, including law firms, banks, real estate offices, and government agencies. Their work touches numerous aspects of our lives, from property transactions and wills to business contracts and immigration paperwork. This amendment will empower the Attorney General to waive fees for persons that fall into certain categories. We live in an ever-changing society, and some of our laws are outdated and out of use. Madam President, this amendment will resolve some of the long-standing issues. As many of you all in here are aware, licenses sometimes fall into suspension after a number of years if it is not in use, and eventually are suspended. Under the existing act, persons that want to reactivate their license attract fees for each of the years that they have been inactive. This is a very vexing and to a large degree unreasonable. I would like to give an example to you all. Let's say that a judge who has spent 15 to 20 years on the bench, and during that time the person would not use their notary license during that period. And once they are no longer a judge and want to reclaim their notary's license, they will have to pay 15 to 20 years of fees to reclaim their license. This amendment will empower the AG to waive those fees and allow persons to reclaim their license without the exorbitant fees. I am happy to be able to lend support to this amendment because change will not come if we wait for some others or some other time. We are the ones that we are here today, and we are the change of what we seek of. And Madam President, I firmly support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Quentin Lightburn. As many? As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Ramming.
Yeah, thank you very kindly, Madam President. This is really a non-contentious issue, and wanted to flow rather quickly. So just one or two questions I have that I want to ask. One is basically clarification, because we know that the public is viewing. So I think I grasp the AG intent. He can make that part very, very clear for me. For the example that was used as related to the gap that could occur in licensing, and it will be picked up from the time of renewal, and the renewal would reflect that gap. I just wanted to make it very, very clear that does mean, which in my opinion, that in that period where the gap is, your notary business or no notary activity should have been done within that time, just for clarity for the public. Since you already say yeah, I'll just say yes for you. Because sometimes the important little things wave over the head. I also want to, in that regard, stemming from what was just said by the senator before me, in relation to this waiver and the necessity for this waiver for the persons in the legal profession, he used very, very vexing and unreasonable as it relates to having those licenses that were dormant and having to go and pay that back fee on those licenses. I see and I understand from the opening of the AG, and I don't necessarily take no umbrage against it or issue against it, even though I do note clearly, as was said by one of the esteemed lawyers in here, Senator Barnett, in and of itself, that lawyers could pay that little thing, which is $200 in back payment. $250 is within their, it is within their means to be able to pay that. That sparked me to ask another question, which I don't believe has been corrected, because these class of people fall basically within the exact same domain. We have persons who are taxi, livery, omni franchise, what we call jitney drivers, et cetera, and for whatever reason, if they find themselves out of the business or down for a long period of time, to the best of my understanding, when it's time for them to become re-engaged in the business again and take it up, that they are required to pay their back licensing fees for their badge. Notwithstanding the fact that they do have a driver's license, which is active, the badge license, just like the notary public license, offer them a special privilege within a wider regime. And I would think that under the same tone that was said by Senator before, that is very vexing and also unreasonable, that for whatever reason, whether it's health, sickness, whether it's in the case of an owner-occupied vehicle, the vehicle might have been down for some years, or maybe they took up a job somewhere else, and then now find themselves wanting to go back in the industry, or to operate a vehicle, or even in some instances just to drive their own vehicle, meaning pick up my vehicle from an employee and take it back. I got to get someone else to drive it because I don't have a license anymore, it's expired. They have to pay all their back fees. I would want to ask the Attorney General, in the same spirit of what is being done here, and even in consideration of these persons who may be even up to higher espelunch in their waiver, that these persons who we do consider the bread and butter back grassroots persons and the ground and the very, very critical sector of our middle class, that this government consider amending the policies or the law as relate to those classes of a license, that with a special either application or explanation or proof, that they can now go and apply and get their licensees, their public service license renewed without having to pay all the arrears from a time they hadn't used it. Final example would be myself. I still have vehicles. I gotta hire somebody to even drive it, even if I want to move it from one place to the next or just secure it, because my badge now probably hadn't been renewed for about 10 years. if I have to go and renew it just so I could move my own vehicle, I'm going to have to pay up 10 years worth of licensing fees because I had no use for it. So would that be something that the government would consider in the interest of those in the public transportation system? Thank you very much, and with that I rest, Madam President.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Ruben Rami. As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Madam President, for recognizing me. I want to thank everybody for the nice, expeditious debate today on this bill. There's not much to really respond to except for the points that Senator Ramming would have raised. Just to be clear, if you have your license in suspension, you are not duly licensed to conduct a notary activity, and then if you do so, you'll be violating the law. Just to be clear on that. With respect to the second point you raised a very good point, and I think with respect to taxi drivers and bus drivers, and looking to see if we have a suspension mechanism in those cases. I just sent an email to my drafting team to put that under consideration and look at the framework for being able to extend that, because you're absolutely right. As we say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so we're already starting to look at that based on your suggestion. The instructions have already been given. With that sum up, I move for the second reading of the Notary's Public Amendment Bill 2023.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Notary's Public Act. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Order the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Notary's Public Act.
For the second reading of bills.
And none, Madam President.
Committee of the Whole.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with the Vice President in the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair. As many are in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with respect to a bill for an act to amend the Notary's Public Act, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 4 be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 through 4 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried. Clauses 2 through 4 of the bill are agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be now agreed in its entirety.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move that the President do now take the chair.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the President do now take the chair. As many are in favor say aye. Those who oppose say nay. Madam President will now take the chair. Madam President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Vice President and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bill, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Yes, Madam President. Madam President, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Notaries Public Act.
Order that this bill do now pass, and the title thereof declared to be Notaries Public Amendment Act 2023. Further third reading of bills.
There are none, Madam President.
Consideration of House amendments. Resolutions. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings.
Madam President, I want to renew all notices in the name of the government.
Orders for clerk. Adjournment.
Madam President, I will move that the Senate at its rising do adjourn until Friday, the 28th of July.
Thursday, the 27th.
Friday or Thursday?
Friday, the 28th. Friday, the 28th of July, 2023 at 10 a.m. Madam President, it is our intention at that time, on that day, to commence debate on the second reading and committal of the Antiquities, Monuments, and Museums Amendment Bill. As well, we want to deal with the Magistrates Amendment Bill, which we anticipate will come from the House by that time. And as well, we want to deal with the bill that deals with the Governor General's volunteerism bill, the bill to encourage volunteerism. So volunteerism, Antiquities, Monuments, and Museums, and Magistrates is what we anticipate that we will deal with on Friday.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn to the 28th of July, 2023 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many are in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion is carried. The Senate stands adjourned.